welcome to this mega roundtable. So we're going to be talking about how to transform your CX. I'm Lee Hopwood, CEO at the CCMA, the Call Centre Management Association here in the UK, and I have an amazing panel of experts. I've got to speak today. I have an amazing panel of experts that are here ready to take your questions and share their advice. They're all joining me on screen here. So we have Becky Simpson and Jason Roberts, both CX consultants that have a lot of experience behind them in transforming contact center operations. Becky has worked with organizations including Dataforce, Serco, IHG, National Express, Carnival, HCA Healthcare, Transport for Wales, and PRS for Music, where she's spending a bit of time at the moment. And as well as working with Dixon's Carphone, Jason was behind the transformation at Ocado that won Large Contact Centre of the Year at our UK National Contact Centre Awards earlier this year. We also have Nick Viles. He is a seasoned industry leader that has delivered CX solutions to iconic brands around the world for over 20 years. And Nick is head of CX and analytics consulting at T-Tech. So a lot of experience that we can draw on there. And we are also joined by the Director of Experience Innovation at Genesis, Zahir Galini. And he is, this was interesting, he is the author of Customer Journey Mapping Workbooks, founder of CX Brainstorm, and has developed and launched the CX industry's first customer experience casual 3D mobile game. Maybe we'll ask him about that a bit later. But first, this is a mega roundtable, and I'm really grateful to T-Tech and T-Tech Digital with Genesis for supporting the program today, the event today. So we are looking for your views and your questions. So please use the chat, preferably the chat. I have got the Q&A open, but if you can use the chat, we are really interested in what you've got to say, as well as our experts. And maybe you've got questions for our experts, but please do post in the chat, and I will bring them into the conversation as we go. Now, there are three areas that I'd really like to cover off today. So we are going to look at business cases and metrics. We will look at the options around transforming your CX. And it makes sense for us to look at this drive to digital. It would seem that that's a direction of travel that quite a few contact center operations are going in. But first, what do we mean by CX in the context of this conversation? Nick, will you answer that for me in the first instance?
Okay, so there are lots of definitions of CX out there, and I'm sure everyone will have their favourites. The ones I particularly like are the ones that look at customer experience from the broadest sense, really, which is that sort of collection of a customer's perceptions and feelings as they interact with the brand's sort of products and services, and how well their needs or issues have been met or exceeded compared to their expectations. And those expectations, I would say, are a combination of what the brand promises and what they hear from other sources as well. But sort of in the narrower sense of the contact center, obviously that is key. It's a key part of the delivery of that brand promise. Get it right, and you may have a customer for life. Get it wrong, and you may lose them without ever knowing why. So, the trouble is sometimes we're very focused just on the contact center's metrics and what CX means to them, but the brand needs to look at it from an end-to-end customer lifecycle and interaction perspective, and only then can you set what CX means for the contact center, I believe.
Thank you, Nick. Jason, does that resonate with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting when you talk about perceptions and feelings, because you do have those expectations at the moment, and to be fair, through the last couple of years, everybody's expectation has been shaken a little bit, I feel. We've tended to rely on some trusted brands, but absolutely agree with Nick's point there. You've got to look not just at the conversation that we have and that we hold within our teams, which is in effect the only real true voice of the customer in the business, but how you take that out of the contact center and embed that within the organization. And I think some of those key changes that we need to make for all of our brands now is to ensure that we are getting the voice out of the floor, out of the contact center and into the boardroom.
Yeah, which obviously is something that I am advocating a lot on at the moment. And so just coming back to that CX transformation, and it's a phrase that has been around for several years. It's something that I'm aware of many organizations trying to do for several years, but why is it so prominent now? Jason, why is it so important right now?
I think there's three things, aren't there, that are driving this now. We've come out of pandemic with the challenges that's given everybody. We've got clear evidence that customers are unhappy at the service levels that we're seeing from the majority of our contact centers and our delivery vehicles right now. But you look internally and we've got significant challenges around the recruitment, the messaging, and the cost of living crisis that all of our colleagues are going through. Then separate that from the fact that we have this CX transformation, which has been a digital play for many years, quite often taking away the very transactional and very simple activities. So we're left with a much more challenging conversation quite often, and areas of business that lead to more challenging conversations for our colleagues, really struggling with resilience there around some of the challenges that you're facing. And I think, from many businesses now, it's a choice between where we move next for digital transformation. We've got real clarity around the basics that can be done transactionally, very simple, and most customers now accept that I'd rather use an app for very simple activities. But when it comes to it and it's emotive for me, I do want to be able to speak with one of your colleagues that's going to be trusted and empowered to do the right thing for me. And I think a lot of this comes back to what you're measuring as your basics, what you're measuring as your transactional measures within the site. And are we still transactional, or are we starting to look at outcome-based measures? And that's where I would hope that we're all in that transition right now.
Interesting. So, and there is evidence that suggests that speed of resolution, so speed to answer and FCR brought together, but the speed of resolution is the #1 driver for CSAT.
Yeah.
And I'm going to come to you, Becky. Should a CX transformation therefore focus on this as a key objective?
I think, to a large extent, that's kind of a hygiene factor. And, there is research that shows that 50% of customers expect to not have to wait for resolution at all. So they, depending on why they're contacting, they expect an easy, convenient self-service channel, or maybe the use of AI. It does depend on what the nature of the contact is. And I think there's a lot of places that we can potentially fail before, in terms of speed resolution. We need to think about, was the contact necessary in the first place? Did we fall at that first hurdle? Were we accessible in the channel that the customer was choosing? What about the effort required to get to us before we even had a chance to resolve, if it couldn't be done in an automated way? And I think these days it's about the value add and the trust that the customer feels in the brand that they're dealing with. Are we demonstrating the empathy and the old-fashioned skills that we used to have that perhaps have been lost as maybe we've dehumanized a little bit with automation? So I think customers are now looking for us to be proactive, and they want convenience. They want us to preempt the reasons why they're going to be contacting us. And a lot of this is about how we make them feel as well, which is something that Jason mentioned.
Jason, I heard you agreeing with Becky quite a bit there. Was there anything in particular that you thought, yeah, I'm with you there, Becky?
I think the key for us is we are seeing that change in our emphasis. We were very much an inbound organization, inbound industry, dealing with reactive touch points from customers. Thankfully, through great digital and data solutions, we're able now to become more reactive and to start being proactive and looking far less reactive, rather, and being much more proactive in how we handle those customer journeys. So mapping of customer pain points, and part of what CX transformation was sort of 2 to 3 years ago, was trying to get that end-to-end piece that Nick described there, making sure that we are looking at all of the points and touch points of the customer within the business before they get to the contact center and the customer hubs. Now we're talking about actually within that journey, making sure that we are delivering on promises, and that where we can see there's a risk of something going wrong, we start to be proactive and message ahead, and therefore take the front control, if you like, and start managing those customer journeys. And I referenced a great example earlier this week where, one of the a day out I've got coming up, and the guys had just reached out to me and said, you know what, we've realized you've overpaid for your ticket, here's your refund. It was a fabulous little experience where they went, we've checked ahead for you and this is what we found. brilliant service, and I will talk about those guys as we move on. But yeah, that for me is where our industry has the opportunity now to take absolutely our businesses forward and take forward the promises that we make to our customers and build a better environment for our colleagues, because everybody feels stronger if you're actually on the front foot with good information, able to deal with a customer in the right way.
And Lee, this is a pet topic of mine. I don't know whether you want to get into it now or a bit later, but
share your view.
Yeah. I mean, I love the proactive, the preemptive, and the proactive. There's a great book called Upstream, which talks about solving the problems before they happen. And we know that contact center leaders have got it tough at the moment. They're fighting, they're running harder, working harder to what may feel like they're just standing still. And essentially all the chickens are coming home to roost under their watch type thing, and they have to deal with them. And if they ever start feeling that that's just a crazy world to live in, is then start sort of taking a look up and start working with your colleagues upstream to be able to solve those problems, because why customers are contacting you. The reasons, where in your organization those problems arise from. I was talking to one organization the other day who wants to go from sort of 80% reactive to 80% proactive. Now that's quite a journey to get to that kind of level of proactivity. The CEO of this organization says, I want my organization to be more like a software company where we're issuing improvements on the go, like a DevOps environment with a physical product, rather than just sort of waiting years to sort of get the feedback into the organization, build better products, build better services, and get them out there. The contact center is the point at which the customer tells us what's wrong with the rest of our business. And so I think leaders, I know that you're busy at the moment, should be given the time to be able to sort of solve those problems upstream, really, and say them. I mean, it's just sort of crazy that we're just sort of dealing with the same old problems, because they'll keep coming. They'll keep coming unless we solve them upstream. So I couldn't agree more, and it's great to hear sort of Jason's example.
Thank you, Nick. And just to remind everybody that if you want to have your say, please do post your comments, your questions in the chat, and we will bring them into the conversation. And I guess what we've explored there are reasons for the objectives behind CX transformation, but surely that access to data is critical when you are looking at building a business case for how you're going to transform your CX, Nick.
Sorry, was that to me, Lee?
Yes, it is to you, Nick.
Okay. Obviously access to data is key, but I imagine many of these people's on the call here will the last thing on their Christmas list will be more data, because they're probably sort of drowning in data at the moment. So as we all know, it's not about the volume of data, it's about the smartness and data and what you can do with it. And it's about sort of less data, more insight. And the key thing is how you can use that data to create that compelling business case, because at board level, sometimes you have to explain what customer experience is and the value it adds to the business. But all they're really interested in is, given current circumstances, budgets are tight and finite resources, they're only really interested on the return on the capital employed. So why should they invest in experience versus something else? And why is customer experience a priority? I mean, obviously, in today's climate, if you can prove efficiency savings, then that is sort of pretty straightforward, as long as you have the data that helps you identify where those efficiencies are to be found and the scale of those. And the best way to do that is just to have that data, the key data, and slim it down to the key things. And to know the sort of the cause and effect behind efficiencies, because I think it was Becky that said earlier, just because you can put a bot out there, or even a bot on conversational AI solution on the voice channel, you will only deal with your simple intent. It may contain 15% of your contacts, but actually your average handling time is increasing. So you might not be hitting to how you're measured, albeit maybe wrongly. So you really need to think about that cause and effect around those efficiencies, because you press one button here and something flares up something else. If you have to move on to perhaps a more compelling business case, which is how experience leads to loyalty, which then leads to more revenue, which will be probably as compelling, especially these days, on how to increase revenue, then that is a little bit more difficult. And the contact center leader would have to get data from outside of their natural environment and speak to their marketing teams. Because, you know, I'm still quite surprised sometimes when you go into an organization, there is no connection between experience, loyalty. They can't track that path through and then through to revenue growth. It is hard. It's a bit like what if scenarios. But I would say a collection of people who are really interested in tracking that journey and the cause and effects and getting some evidence to back that up, albeit it's quite hard, really could pull together a compelling data-driven business case to their board, and hopefully move up that priority list to help you stopping that for you to run faster to stay still.
It was interesting. I read a stat the other day that better than it was, but only 30% of organisations have CX in the boardroom. It's better than it was, but it's still only 30%. So I think there's still a lot of work that we need to do to make sure that the customer's voice is absolutely front and centre in the boardroom.
I saw a report recently that said in the States that over 50% of organizations, that the head of customer has a marketing background. Now, there's always there was a debate on LinkedIn a few months ago about should they be a sort of contact center operational, come up through from the front line, or should they be a chief marketing officer that is responsible for customer? Well, I think they both bring different things to that party and different perspectives. So.
No, I'd agree with you there, Nick. I think the key piece here is, have we got the voice within the boardroom, and are those accountable for the adjacent areas of the business working together on the solutions? So whenever we talk about the areas outside of the contact center in terms of the KPI and the metrics, I term those as the adjacent benefits that we deliver through business cases. You know, and they are things such as we've reduced the contact on delivery. Well, that's great. We've got a contact reduction efficiency measure, but actually we've also probably improved our failed delivery rate, which means that our fleet and our operational teams are seeing a cost saving on their P&L as well. And it's taking those two component parts of the effect that we have within our own control, plus the adjacent benefit that we drive for an external part of the business, putting those together into your benefit case obviously can add greater value, and often more significant than purely the first action that you were perhaps looking at when siloed into your contact center view. So very important to make sure that at board level, we're challenging across all of those areas. So such as the digital directors, the marketing directors, supply chain and operations, all working together and taking that customer voice and willingly doing so. I think that is the key challenge. And I also saw that same survey and questioned the same thing in my mind. And I've worked with different components and different structures many times through the years. And there is, exactly as you say, the benefit to both, but it is so much better with a strong blend. Nice.
And you know that we could take that conversation into a whole new area around marketing and CX and contact centers. So for me, the big question at this point in the conversation is, how do you know when you've got there? So what on earth do you measure? I mean, I have this view that there are tactical and operational measures, and that contact center leaders are using these on a daily basis. To determine really what's going well and what isn't going well, and being able to make those tweaks and changes on that minutiae detail. But then there are the strategic KPIs that the rest of the business understands, not just contact centers and marketing, but the rest of the business understands. So starting at the top, what is that golden metric? Is it customer effort? Is it NPS? Is it CSAT? Nick, I'm going to come to you first, and then Becky, I'm going to ask your view after.
Okay, so the metric debate. Okay, so again, I think LinkedIn has got sort of pages on this. So I don't know if you follow a guy called Ed Thompson in Gartner, and but you know, he's been in the customer experience game for sort of 20+ years. And I've sort of grown up with him, I guess, in a professional sense, I should say. And I think he talks a lot of sense about this. It's about that when I was talking about the end-to-end journey, it's about having metrics across that end-to-end journey. And unfortunately, you know, we're stuck with some of the old metrics in contact centers, but it's about putting the metrics of the contact center within the context of that overall journey. And what Ed Thompson talks about is about having a collective. So you know, the companies I admire most for their experience, the ones I work with, they don't have one measure and they don't have hundreds of measures, but they have a carefully selected basket of measures that reflect what they want to do, how they interpret what good customer experience is. So I don't think there's a magic answer, a magic collection, but what I see in companies is that there is a consistent set that aligns to their strategy around customer experience, and that will vary from company to company. So I think it's about determining the set of metrics that suit you. And then what I've also seen is others bring short-term metrics in, particularly around, let's say, tracking the benefits of a particular investment, a technology, particularly a digital channel technology these days. But it's only a short-term metric, because there's a lot of metrics in the early days of putting in a bot, putting in something on the voice channel. But then actually, once it's settled down, you don't quite need as many metrics around that, because it's stabilized, it's settled, you're comfortable with where it's going. You need to continuously tune it, of course, based on metrics, but you don't need 30 for the digital channels. So having that flexibility, having that core set, a collective that reflects what you want to do with your customers and that will drive the right behavior, because we all know there are ways around metrics and people are very good at finding their ways around it. But the one thing, you know, we shouldn't forget the front line here. I think employee engagement is a constant one, because, you know, at the end of the day, however digital we get, however proactive and preemptive we get in our outbound versus inbound, at the end of the day, it's down to the people, particularly these days. And I think, you know, that kind of employee engagement has to be part of that collective basket of metrics.
And I think that's a really good point to bring Becky in. And Becky, I am going to raise the question that's been brought up in the chat. Is it more introspective? Should one of those measures in that basket be attrition?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. Although I think, you know, some attrition is good. It depends, you know, where you're going to set that bar. Nick stole all the thunder. Actually, I can't say that I can add too much to what he said. I was hoping he wasn't going to say.
It wasn't me. It was Ed Thompson that I was quoting. So.
But engagement, I think for me, staff engagement was the thing I was going to come to. And actually, a lot of what we've been talking about, as the irony is, as we use more automation, more systemization, the role of the people becomes more important in a different way, I think. And, you know, the big difference that I see today is the expectations of the employees. They expect to be involved in a greater way and in more things than they would have done in the past. And that's a real challenge for us, because we've got challenges recruiting people in the first place right now, haven't we? Lots of vacancies across the country. And yet, you know, in the work that I do in contact centre transformation, you know, shrinkage levels have to be extremely high to take these people on a journey of transformation. So, you know, we need to invest more in our people, allow them more time to get involved in the improvements and driving the strategic change than ever we have before. And they expect to do that. And if they don't get that opportunity to be involved, then they're going to leave. So we get back to what Lee's talking about in terms of that attrition measure. So it's a real challenge. There's no easy answer right now, because you've got to involve the people and they have the insight. You can look at all the data you want to, but they're the ones that know the detail about what we need to do differently, which sometimes isn't obvious. You can see the problems from the data. You can pinpoint the priorities. It doesn't tell you exactly what you've got to do, though. And it's the rich information from your frontline staff that gives you the answer to what you need to do about that, in my opinion.
Yes. Now, I want to move the conversation on, if I may. And I know we could talk much more about business cases and metrics and, you know, what we should be looking at. But I want to move the conversation on to explore the options that are available for doing a CX transformation. And Becky, I'm going to come back to you first. What's your view in terms of where should organisations start?
Wow. Depends whether they've got a burning platform or not, I suppose. Sometimes, well, I must say that usually, so independent consultants like me, you don't get invited to go and help an organisation that knows they've got everything sorted. It doesn't happen that way. So normally there is some perceived challenge. And, you know, there's always room for opportunity. And actually, I start with the people always, and you know, the people always have the answers. And I think one of the things we haven't talked about here is what is the impact of our new ways of working in terms of hybrid working or remote working on our ability to transform and take the people on the journey of transformation. Because actually we have to work extra hard, don't we, to engage with them when they might be not in the office at all, or once a month or once a week. You know, it's different from how it was. So I would start with the people, and you know, you've got to have a load of, I guess, new mechanisms around communication and getting insight and involving them, both in the remote world, you know, online, and you've got to get people coming into the office to participate in the listening groups, the improvement groups, and all of that stuff when they do come into the office, if they do come into the office. So, and you've got to win the hearts and minds, because actually their roles are changing, aren't they? And they're changing very significantly, and their roles are getting harder. That's happened for however many years I've been involved in contact centres. Every year it's got harder and harder. But now, in order to you know, deliver the AI, to deliver the self-service experience that we want to, we've got to have our people involved in driving the development of that. And then they're also involved in those more emotive calls and contacts that we get because the routine stuff has gone. So you've got to start with the people, is my view.
What about those brilliant basics?
Oh, the brilliant basics, yeah. That's, yeah, I talk a lot about that. Through my middle like a stick of rock, actually. And I think we are, over the years, you know, I started in contact centres in the late 80s. I can't believe I'm saying that. It's a long time ago. And we learned how to do the brilliant basics then, and there wasn't a lot of technology. And I feel as though over the last few years, we've kind of forgotten some of those brilliant basics as we've relied more and more on technology. So now we've got to go back to that. But actually, it's brilliant basics plus, because we've got the impact of the pandemic and the new ways of working. And so leadership, strong leadership, you know, focus on personal development, career development, all of that is super, super important. No, you know, it's so much more important than it ever was before. And so for me, the brilliant basics are about the solid foundation, the operational disciplines, the drum beats that happen day in, day out. And it doesn't matter what you're delivering now and what you'll be delivering in 10 years' time. These things have to be there, otherwise the whole thing falls over. And it's not the most exciting and sexy of things, but if it's missing, it's so obvious. And actually, it's missing quite a lot of the time now, I'm finding. So we've got to work super hard.
So there is a question that's come in that I'm going to post to you, Jason, but Zahir, do get ready, because I have got, I want to bring you into the conversation in a moment. But Jason, the question is, how do you embed a continuous improvement culture in your business to move these great ideas forward?
Great question, Claire. And I think the interesting point in the way that I would say that we've seen success, and I've personally seen success with that, is right at the top of the business. We need to understand, where are we going to position our customer voice? Where are we going to talk through our customer voice, and how we're going to build that into the culture of the business? The continuous improvement culture is something that you need your business's vision to stand behind, develop and evolve, and you need that senior leadership. And genuinely, you know, we tend to talk about C-suite and above. This is literally top down. What is our vision? What's our culture? How do we want to drive and improve for our business? You can start it on the ground level with the teams in the contact centers. You can empower your teams to do that and become the vehicle that across your business displays that culture of improvement until you get to the point of adoption. Because there is that point that if you start it within our organizations and within our customer hubs and our contact centers, we can then take that forward and embed that as part of our growth when you can adopt it. But you will only have permission to take that forward if you are actually going forward onto your business and saying, we have delivered this change. So I would look for one or two small improvements that will deliver significant value for alternate parts of your business. Look for the adjacencies that you can influence and work with key sponsors in those areas to take forward adoption into the business. So then it becomes a customer story for the board.
Nice answer. Thank you very much, Jason. And I'm going to pick And I'm going to pick up on what you're saying there. I mean, and it does lean into what Nick said right at the start around CX being not just in the contact center, it is the whole piece, and trying to support that upstream to stop the pain coming. But Zahir, now you've authored books on customer journey mapping. Is this where you'd recommend you'd start when you're exploring where you can create the biggest impact?
Pretty much aligned. I think for me, the starting point after we've understood the vision, mission, strategy, and culture is to get a view of the customer's total demand across channels and touch points. Because putting fires out in a building, without having the full context and of the situation is likely to be an effective approach to achieving your goals. So, when you start obviously this process, make sure that you have the right stakeholders engaged at the outset. So, for example, even if we take a contact center specific journey, we need insights from other departments. So, for example, customer experience, marketing, digital, products, as the decisions that they take ultimately define the workload that gets handled in the contact centers. And likewise, contact centers, are the treasure trove of insights that the rest of the organizations use. So engage the first line, the second line, the back office, the complaints, the QM, for example, the QM representatives to the session. And of course, obviously, do not forget the actual customer, because they are the ultimate judge of the experience that is being delivered. And then that allows you to quickly identify the key pain points, the points of failures, the channel leakages, for example, that then result in your contact center. A lot of customer journey efforts, in my experience, fail due to poor planning. But when you plan properly, it definitely pays dividends. And if I was to kind of, for example, look at the journey mapping, model, there are a lot of different approaches out there. Just like Nick's point about, there are loads of definitions of customer experience. For me, I think a good journey map or an exercise would be empathy driven, and it starts with the customer. And so you're, like it was mentioned before, that you're capturing basically all of the physical and emotional elements and signals, that are involved in that customer's journey. And approach should be, such that, going back to the KPI points, it allows a business to capture the owners, the people who are responsible for driving the change, and the measures of success for any initiative or opportunity that gets identified as part of that exercise. So I think as long as you have these elements covered, you could hold an effective, journey mapping initiative or exercise, whether it's online or offline.
And it seems that is clearly very good advice. But that understanding that whole journey, that whole customer journey before and after the contact center, will really enable the contact center to be elevated. It's something we talked about a couple of years ago. And I'm loving that there's a chat that's gone to Jason that that someone is trying to do exactly what Jason said a moment ago. Start from the contact center and lead the way for the rest of the business. I think that's really, really compelling. And Jason, so I want to come back to you, Jason, in your time at Ocado. And where did you start? Because Ocado is won awards in the last couple of years, not just at the UK's. But where did you start when you went there?
So the position that we found ourselves when I joined Ocado Retail was joining Ocado Retail just after it had been formed. Really, we'd been running for 7 or 8 months, and we were actually transitioning at that point our contact center from what was Ocado Technology across to Ocado Retail. So the initial engagement with myself was around transferring that into part of Ocado Retail, which gave us a fantastic opportunity, because thankfully I was able to walk in with a blank page of paper that said, we've had an outsourced relationship in our contact center. We want to own the customer and bring forward the vision more. What would you recommend? And it's a brilliant white piece of paper to go in and go, right, actually, here's how I want to build a customer hub. So from our point of view, I was working directly with Laura Harricks, who's our Chief Customer Officer, and Mel as our CEO, and quite simply describing to them how we could take the voice of our customer into board meetings in on a regular frequency basis, getting the cadence in that says, actually, how can we inform the business of the requirements of our customer to drive change. And we had representation across every aspect of the board on a weekly basis, talking about the improvements that we could make for our customer that would help improve the journey, minimize contact, and drive value for the business overall, because that would lower our cost to serve. So I was very thankful to have a extremely supportive board, fantastically supportive CEO. And going forward, it was a case of creating that vision for the business, taking it forward and playing that through with the board team and working with the peers at board to say, actually, what we need to do here is provide the insight and information. We had a lot of work to be done with our data and analytics team, and Nick, so here you absolutely do come through that. And so here, sort of touching on your point of the treasure trove of insight being in the contact center, it absolutely was. And what we knew there is we had a huge amount of data, but we hadn't played it from a customer view in terms of what that would drive for our output. So Nick, you'd be very pleased to hear that we ended up at around 40% proactive outbound campaigns, managing and supporting our customer to both improve their use of basket, improve their longevity with our business, and maintain greater tenure. So lots of great successes that form part of, you know, the business success. But coming back to Becky's point, Lee, this starts with the team. This starts with embedding as part of your values and the business and the coaching that you have and the metrics that you measure. Never once did we talk about average handling time. You would imagine that I would talk about appropriate resolutions and appropriate time to make sure you're driving that resolution for our customer. That was one of the underpinning points of how we built our business. We wanted to ensure that our colleagues felt empowered to deliver change and empowered to deliver feedback. And it was to build a people framework that allowed them to do exactly that. So there are on-the-floor buzz sessions, on-the-floor sections where they guide the guys, whether they be in the office or hybrid working, Becky, they will use the chat functionality to post to their team leaders and to the continuous improvement teams the ideas and thoughts that they're having on a daily basis. They will be collated and we will feedback continually through great communication how we've impacted that change across the organization. So I think, from summarizing it, Lee, very fortunate to have a great leadership team that absolutely backed the plan and backed the idea of it. But then it's such an very engaging and young business. It was fantastic to have that look at the opportunity that this gave us and take it forward with a real passion. So I was very fortunate in that respect.
I love that story. I mean, it's a great, you should write a book, Jason. I think it's a great story. And but I mean, you know, what I find is all people really want to do, most of the people I meet, all they want to do is just make a difference. So if you can listen and act on what they know because they're dealing with it day to day, you just want to show that someone's listening and can make a difference. Now, it might not be huge, you know, but if it's important to them, then if people will listen and the organization can act on it and show and demonstrate, people don't need rewarding. They just, that's some, you know, all the time. It's just about listening and making sure, because that will make people feel valuable inside, and that it's a whole different set of employee engagement than doing a good job. So yeah, I love that story that you actually listen to your front line. I mean,
oh, absolutely. And it's no surprise that, by the way, attrition is a really strong position up there in a very competitive market, and the team are doing an incredibly strong job. So very fortunate to have a great team of inspirational leaders who are willing to stand up front and talk to the teams, get with the teams and have conversations, and everyone makes themselves available. You know, I don't know many businesses where the board would be on site at least once a quarter was kind of the routine, and it was rare that Mel was not there every 6 weeks, you know. So great to have that level of support and the team listening.
Thank you, Jason. Now, there are some comments and questions that are coming through. I am going to ask one more question in this part of the conversation before we start pulling out the drive to digital, which, Paul, I have still got your question and I am going to come back to it. So the question I do want to raise is from Natalia. Would you recommend connecting company NPS results with the employee bonus? And if so, why? Is this the right method to increase the buy-in and creating customer-centric culture within the business? And is there any other metric that would be more suitable? Who would like to take that one? Go on.
I'll have a go if you like. I'll start it off, and then hopefully the others could build on it. Yeah, I guess my point, based on what we've been saying earlier, is NPS the right score for you? Have you done that thinking that says NPS sums up everything that you want to do in terms of your customer experience? if you are that fortunate to have that one metric that defines your whole customer strategy, then maybe you should link it. But I would sort of question that. I would say find the right measures. And I like Jason's point about, sorry to steal it, Jason, but about appropriateness of the response and appropriateness of the interaction, because I think that is probably more relevant and what you really are trying to achieve rather than NPS, because I think that one metric it has its uses, don't get me wrong, but it's on its own, it's a bit sort of narrow and not very helpful. And I think there are, you know, if you've got a large contact center, I think there are technologies these days that are getting better at listening and checking the quality of every call. I still work with contact centers that still do the one call per agent per month QA checks, and I don't know what that drives. It doesn't drive anything really, in my opinion, because it's so random. Statistically, it's unsound. But there is technology today. Okay, I'm not saying it's a magic solution, but it's getting better and better, where you can listen and check every call, and that's where things like call appropriateness, the interaction, the customer effort, the number of interactions between the customer and the agent, all can be monitored and tracked. And then that will tell you which of the calls you want to dive into to investigate further. So a human interaction or human analysis of the call, whereas it'll cover all calls. So I guess I would say I would be a bit skeptical about one measure driving over someone's bonus, because I just think it might drive the wrong behaviors.
Thank you, Nick. Now there is, and just in case anybody is watching the chat, there is a few conversations, comments being shared around the use of voice and chat bots. And this is part of the conversation that I want to open now around this drive to digital. And now I'm hearing all the time that contact centers are pushing consumers to channels that are not supported by humans. We touched on it earlier. And this is driven by this increase in demand that is just not going away. So unfortunately, feedback from consumers is that this might not be going as well as we might have liked it to. Zahir, I'm going to have to bring you into this conversation. What's gone wrong? And I'm going to also bring in Paul's question from earlier. Have we reached a limit on the application of bots for transactional inquiries? And is it time to apply more focus on technology support for agents to support them with the more complex inquiries? Zahir, what's your view? What's happening?
I think it's not necessarily all technology. I think what we need to do is, I think we need to take a step back when you're discussing this. Take a step back and start with the understanding the customer and any particular segment strategy and nuances, for example, for the area that you're looking at, and then capture the overall customer demand across channels, analyze that demand, try to understand that demand, apply, for example, Pareto 80-20, so you can focus on quick and big wins, then apply appropriate contact strategy to it, so you can understand the value that each of the contacts add to the customer and the business. And then you can determine how to handle those contacts, i.e., do you want to simplify something? Do you want to eliminate that process completely? Do you want to leverage it and connect that, for example, contact to the human, or do you want to automate? And then you start, start designing the experience, the persona and the conversational experiences. Just picking up, for example, a topic from an FAQ and automating is not going to cut it. Everyone is being educated on technology nowadays, so it's important that when you're designing the experiences, that we're designing them with the view to make them authentic, in tone that is helpful, that is modest, sort of under promise over deliver mentality might be more appropriate here. Make sure your bots are backed by right human agents, who get the entire context of that inquiry when they're connected, and not only that, but the events that lead to that conversation, and make sure that you are continuously learning from those experiences, and you're improving and reiterating the design. I think if you take these simple steps, you should retrieve your brand image and avoid costly mistakes. So it's not all technology. There is a lot of work that strategy work that goes into it before you approach that topic.
My answer would be do both. So I don't think the bots have reached their limit yet. I mean, you know, the ones that we've put in are learning all the time, albeit perhaps slower than we would like. And they are beginning to deal with slightly more and more complex intents from customers. And actually, you know, interestingly, in one organization we're working with at the moment, the satisfaction score is higher on the bots and the voice AI than it is with agents. And what does that tell you? So I think there's still far more opportunity in that channel, particularly as, you know, the new generations come through. I think they're more used to engaging with that technology. However, I mean, the question is saying, should we invest in the agent assist technologies? I think you should do both, because yeah, the inquiries are getting more complex, and the algorithms around the agent assist technologies are getting better too, as they learn about understanding language, etc., and complex combinations of words in sentences and local accents and different languages. So I you know, invest in both and build your business case, get your data, build your business case about doing both, because both will help you, albeit for different complexity of intents.
Thank you, Nick. And do you know what? I'm reading the comments that are coming through on the chat, and it's really fascinating. There's one: isn't automation of support and chatbot a placeholder until the feature problem is removed in the first place? I suspect, Nick, that's something that you'll be in agreement with. Most customers that need a bot usually means they left the journey designed, meaning extra effort and a risk of losing a customer over time. I guess different industries have different angles and environments. So that's quite interesting. Michael says no to chatbots, yes to AI. Jason, what's your view? No to chatbots, yes to AI?
I think AI-driven chatbots have got a real future. I think the piece here, and it's interestingly, we were in a conversation I think a week or so ago, and I said one of the most interesting pieces that a software business had said to me about a chatbot was, I ought to consider recruiting a chatbot. And they'd use that phrase of recruiting rather than deploying particularly well, because it was to show to the business that once you've brought in that technology, you cannot think it would work on day one as a fully efficient and effective agent. It was to think about the recruitment process and speed to competency of that digital deployment. And that for me was a great description of how you would use technology. And I think that for us is where, as a business, we've probably been hell-bent on driving chatbots and thinking that was going to be our solution, not recognizing or realizing that a chatbot is only as good as the information that you're able to provide it, and the AI on top would then start to learn from that once you've got great use of it. But that was a great sort of analogy for me to sort of keep in mind and think through when talking about digital and chatbots. I'm with Nick on these things, that, you know, there are more elements of automation than you would find at first glance. There are areas of your business that you would not consider for automation, but absolutely where you can and where you're providing guidance to customer, consider the employee, consider how that knowledge bank and that knowledge base can be facing towards the employee, with perhaps with slightly different nuances in the process design, but something about providing that an employee guide for the time when your colleague can't be there. And Becky, taking your point, in hybrid working, even more important now that you haven't got that lean back to lean into the conversation next to you to say, how did you do that, Bex? Well, quite simply, let's provide that in an electronic form, which can be, yeah, absolutely using chatbot and AI conversations for those.
We haven't really touched on knowledge base as a key tool going forward. I mean, the power of the right knowledge base. I mean, we were working with a client that used to have sort of separate product groups, and the agents were dedicated to a single product group because they had to be expert in that product to be able to answer queries. But give them a knowledge base, not that's just presenting articles, but gives them a workflow, a dialogue. I'm not talking about a script, but gives them the idea of how they can go forward. Meant that they could take agents that were previously dedicated to one product line, they could go wider across more product lines, because it was about helping them with the process of getting to the resolution for the customer. And that created huge efficiencies in their contact center. That investment from turning a knowledge base just into presenting articles to an actual workflow knowledge base, agent assist, directed workflows, that kind of thing really made a big difference.
Yeah, going back to my time in Dixon's, actually, when we were doing the evolution team and the guys were looking at process remapping, I would often stand in front of the team and talk about delivering an appropriate solution for each customer that was reasonable to the context of the situation in front of you, because you have the data to understand what is reasonable and appropriate in that manner. If you can't then do that consistently, that tells me that there are one of three things in the way. Either the process was broken or there was an issue with that process. The people around you, or perhaps your manager or line manager, had said that that was not something that they were prepared to let you do. So that's a problem with the leadership and management to allow for empowerment. Or the politics of the business said that that was a different silo and it wasn't necessarily within our gift. So that's why I became really passionate about ensuring you've got a customer story and a customer hub where you're presenting that story up to board so that everybody understands the breadth and width of the solution that's needed.
Becky, I want to bring you in because there are a couple of things that Jason and Nick talked about there on the back of the comment from Paul around supporting frontline colleagues better in order to deliver that a better CX. What's your view on there? Where should the priorities be in terms of supporting the frontline?
So I think there's been a massive underinvestment typically in supporting the front line. Because I think when we're doing that, going back to the business case bit in the first place and the investment we need to make, I think often that's focused on what are we going to expose for the customer, and we've forgotten about the need for the agents, the advisors themselves. So that means then that often your customers know more because they've got access to more, and if you've not allowed enough development time either for your frontline staff, they just don't keep up to date with what the customer has access to. So they're on a back foot from the start. And then we come back to attrition because they're dealing with multiple old legacy systems without a knowledge base, dealing with a range of products and services, and it's very frustrating for them. So I think that's a key thing at the start of your project. What tools do you need to develop to support your staff? And you'd want to give those really to the staff first before you give them to the customer, but often it doesn't happen that way around. So I think there's a lesson to be learned there in a number of organisations.
So I want to pull something out that Sima finished on one of her comments earlier, and Sima says always giving the customer the choice of channel and option to solve. I want to pull out this choice of channel. So we saw through the pandemic that some organisations opened more channels so that they could deal with the expanding of that side of their customer base. But some shut down channels because it was just too difficult to deal with that influx from lots of different channels. Jason, I know you've got a view on this, so can I come to you around what your view is around your choice of channel? Should you be offering more? Should you be offering less?
I think it depends on where you find yourself in that digital journey, what the stack of technology is that's available to you, and what your level of confidence and resilience is across that framework. Because I've worked in organizations where we've had limited channels and we've gone with 3 or 4 channels and we've allowed customers to choose and switch between them. But at times in history, that wasn't a connected journey. So that gave you a risk that customers were contacting you in multiple channels and you were not able to provide the colleague with the right information to support them. Where you've got a strong platform, a strong set of basics, and as Becky would say, that you've got brilliant basics in place and you've got a brilliant base platform, then yes, absolutely, let's try to provide the choice of channel to the consumer. However, be very clear that if you have any risk in channel, I would have the confidence and be bold enough to say that you're happy to close that off and manage effectively, professionally, and as quickly as possible through those channels that you choose to invest against. So it can be a choice based on business, by industry, by customer requirement. You could find some processes absolutely require certain channels. I think most of us have kind of realized now that for self-serve and basic stuff, we're quite happy with an app or a chatbot. I think then we also would like to see how we can quickly move that conversation into a human interaction if necessary, or if it's unable to complete the task for us. But again, the basics for me are quite simple. You need to be able to deliver and have confidence in your strength to deliver a strong enough response in that channel. And by response, I do mean the speed of resolution and the friction that you may put in front of customers before you get to them is obviously the biggest watch out from my point of view. Let's try to keep it as friction free as possible. If that means that you're better off managing 3 channels very, very well, do so. And guess what? customers will find those channels that are most effective. And if that is clear and easily signposted, then you're in a good position. I don't think there's any one answer that's right for all at this point. I think it is very much around what does your architecture allow you to do, and how confident are you in the ability of your business to deliver it.
Thank you, Jason. Zahir, I am going to ask you this question before I come back to you all for your final thoughts, conscious of time. Zahir, the question that's come in is, and just leaning into what Jason was talking there, is it time to switch off or reduce emails? I've heard other companies are dialing this down and using social media instead. Zahir, what are your views?
I'm saying make sure it depends on the business and the context. I'm seeing some businesses completely going in email. The others are, getting rid of the email. But in between, I'm finding async, a rise of async messaging a lot, because that offers both the customer and the business the right, balance in terms of how they can serve the customer. There is it's great for all of those journeys, all of those tasks where you're not time sensitive and you have to deliver something. So I think it depends on the context and the business. In B2B context, I'm still seeing emails rising up. Dealing with enterprise area, they're definitely switching towards async and reducing their emails.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Zahir. So quickly round the table, what are your final thoughts? What's your final nugget of advice for those that are listening? And to give you guys a 10 seconds to think, one of the things that's come in the chat from Michael is one of his takeaways is take the voice into the boardroom. I quite like that. So I'm going to come to you first, Jason. What's your, very quickly, what's your big piece of advice?
So in 10 seconds, take the voice to the boardroom. Absolutely. Remember, the confidence that you build is the confidence that you show and share to your customers. I think there are 3 things in this. Treasure trove of insight. Remember where we're finding that. Great point from Zahir. Use your data effectively, and don't forget the adjacent benefits that you drive for your business, because that's how you'll engage your boardroom.
Thank you, Jason. Becky?
Take time to plan your CX transformation and think about, when does the transformation project become continuous improvement, and how are you going to embed that culture?
Nice. Zahir?
Start with the customer, as empathy is the key.
Oh, nice. You are spot on. That, well, from what I'm seeing and hearing, empathy is absolutely critical right now. Nick, final word.
Mine would be bold, because if you're sort of doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome, it won't happen. So be bold, and if you're running harder to stay still, then try and change the game, or at least, or if not, play the game in a different way. Be bold. Nice. Thank you so much. So you heard it all here first. Thank you to our panel, to Nick, to Zahir, to Becky, to Jason. Thank you so much for giving us your time today to come and share your expertise and your experiences. Thank you to everyone for joining me today. Really, really appreciate you being here. And a huge thank you to T-Tech and T-Tech Digital with Genesis for enabling us to have this mega roundtable. And we look forward to continuing this conversation over the coming weeks and months as we go into 2023, because we know that this is going to be on your minds for a long time yet to come. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yes, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks all.